What if I told you that the 401k, the financial savings plan that is nearly ubiquitous in the American public scope of retirement planning and investing, may not be the right choice for you, or at least not in the way that you may think? Over the years, the 401k has become one of those terms you hear in the media and discussed around the dinner table as one of the tenets of the American dream, along with home ownership, the backyard with a picket fence and a dog in it, and a spouse with 2.5 kids. Well, similar to how many of these tried and true life milestones have been disrupted to many due to rising costs of living, stagnating wages, and large personal consumer debts, it's time to reevaluate and see if it still makes sense to contribute to a 401k for your financial future, and the ever important question, how much money should you actually be putting away? This answer will be a little bit different for everyone, but in order to drill deep and uncover an answer, we first need to understand why 401ks are even offered in the first place and who benefits from them and in what ways. Long gone are the days where the average employee works for the same company for their whole career and could depend on a pension once they were retired. As population sizes in the US grew rapidly in the back half of the 20th century, companies large and small could no longer handle the massive financial liabilities that pensions were causing to their balance sheets, especially as the life expectancy of the country was continuously increasing. There have been plenty of corporations that have had to declare bankruptcy after their pensions failed, with several that have been widespread news stories over years, even in major companies including General Motors, United Airlines, and Weirton Steel that were supposed to be, as some said, too big to fail. So as we fast forward today, only a few select industries still even offer pensions, and typically you need to be some sort of government employee, whether that be a federal official, a teacher, or some sort of service like firefighting or maybe even railroad workers. And even these offerings have become more rocky, as we all know. A couple private companies such as John Deere and Procter & Gamble do still offer this benefit, but it has become increasingly rare. And if this video inspires you to go search and work for one of those places, well, tell John Deere to send me a free lawnmower for sending you their way. The transition to the 401k became the default retirement savings plan with the passing of the Revenue Act of 1978. This specific act included a provision, Section 401k of the IRS tax code, that allowed employees to defer compensation on a pre-tax basis. A lot of other developments that you probably don't care about aside, companies quickly realized the financial benefits of offering primarily 401ks to employees instead of pensions, because now the burden of retirement planning was shifted to the employee as well as the company itself. But let's be honest here, the majority of the onus is now on the employees themselves, and there are a lot of important and potentially confusing decisions that you now have to make potentially on your own, like choosing how much to contribute to your 401k, what investments to pick out of what the plan even offers, and how do you try to make sure that this money is going to last you for the rest of your life. Even just bringing these things up may invoke a feeling of stress in you right now, as it can be very overwhelming. So let's talk through how these retirement savings plans work in the first place and how you can make the best decisions for yourself. 401ks fall into what are called tax-deferred accounts, where the size of the contribution to the account that year counts as a deduction or a decrease in what is considered your taxable income for that year. Depending on the industry you work in, you may be offered a different type of tax-deferred account, but they all function very similar to the 401k. A few examples of these may be a 403b if you work in education, or a 457 or a thrift savings plan if you're a government employee. So let's take a closer look at how that works. If you had an individual who was making $70,000 a year and wanted to be a disciplined saver and investor who invests 10% of their yearly gross salary into their 401k with the goal of growing their retirement funds down the road, then a deduction of $7,000 would come off of their taxable income for that year, and their new income eligible to be taxed that year would now be $63,000 before any other deductions they may qualify for, or if they take the standard deduction in their tax filing. However, an individual retirement account, or an IRA for short, functions in a very similar way. So how is a company holding up their end of the bargain if they're no longer offering you that guaranteed income in the form of a pension? Well, they do this by offering you what is called a company match to your contribution. There are a few different ways this can be done depending on the company, but it's often done either as a dollar for dollar match up to a certain percentage, let's say 4% for this example, or they may offer a partial match of your contribution. In the dollar for dollar scenario, a company will match every dollar you contribute with one of their own, up to whatever percentage they specify as a limit. So if we use that $70,000 salary with a 4% match scenario, then the company would be contributing a maximum of $2,800 a year to your 401k from their own pockets. You can still contribute more than the match percentage, but the company will not go above that specified amount and continue to invest their money into your account above that match percentage threshold. Now, going back to the beginning of the video, we said that we need to examine who benefits from the switch to pensions to this match style of employee-employer contributions. So the company, on their end, get to write off all of their 401k contributions to employees as expenses, which reduces their taxable income for the year. They also know that many employees won't actually contribute to their 401k at all, either due to a combination of a lack of financial education, or just the fact that they need every dollar in their paycheck to make ends meet now with the inflation and rising costs of living, instead of worrying about what their financial future or their retirement looks like down the line. This has allowed companies to massively reduce their liabilities because they are only contributing a few percent yearly to that employee, and only while that individual is employed by them, instead of owing them a set amount of money for the rest of their life, assuming that they've worked the X amount of years needed to qualify back in the pension era. So what does this mean for you? And if you can take away one thing from this video, lock in now and pay close attention, because this is going to be very important. Now, on the employee's end, for many years, the tax-deferred accounts were heralded as a massive advantage because it allows you to reduce your taxable income each and every year you contribute, and all of those investments actually grow tax-deferred in the account, meaning you don't have to pay any taxes on the gross on a yearly basis like you do your income until you take withdrawals from the account, which are first allowed at age 59 and a half typically. However, this deferral is actually a double-edged sword that needs to be understood really well. It may make sense on the surface to try to stuff in as much money into a tax-deferred account as you reasonably think you can afford because of the tax break you receive in the short term and the deferral on your gross. But when you understand the effects of compound interest, it becomes clear how this actually becomes a detriment to you after a certain point. Think of it this way. Each kernel on a cob of corn is an individual seed that can be planted and grown into a stalk in its own right. Now let's say someone offered you a free 5-pound bag of corn kernels under one of two conditions that you could agree to. First, you could allow them to keep 20% of the kernels up front, or you could defer this kernel repayment, but they would collect 20% of the entire crops in the field once the harvest season's over. Which of those would you agree to? And for all of you watching, I think it becomes pretty apparent in that thought experiment that paying your 20% tax up front results in you having way more corn overall than paying that 20% once you've collected all of your harvest and paying it back at the end. This is because of the effect of compound interest and how your money grows over time. The same thing applies to your retirement accounts. It is also important in this to remember that oftentimes people end up in higher tax brackets later in life than they think because they no longer have other deductions they had when they were younger, such as mortgage payments or child tax credits. So what does this all mean for you if the 401k tax deferral is not all the fine and dandy thing it's hyped up to be? It's where the alternate of the Roth IRA comes into play. The Roth is an example of what you call a tax-exempt account. These accounts work the opposite of their tax-deferred counterparts, where you do not get to take the tax deferral up front, but all of the money grows tax-free and can be withdrawn tax-free starting at age 59 and a half. This is how, going back to the corn scenario, you pay your kernel tax up front and you get to keep all of your remaining harvest later on. Now, am I telling you to just completely ditch the 401k and only contribute to the Roth? No, I am certainly not. And the reason why is there are a couple limitations to a Roth that need to be understood. First, a Roth IRA has an individual contribution limit of $7,000 per year or $8,000 a year if you are over age 50. Second, if you make more than $150,000 as a single tax filer or $236,000 as married joint tax filers, you're ineligible to contribute to a Roth IRA at all because you're over the Roth income limit. And it's also very important to remember that the company 401k match we talked about earlier is really free money that we always recommend you take. However, once someone reaches that maximum contribution match with their 401k, it's normally a better idea to contribute to the Roth IRA next and grow their tax-exempt money before continuing to put money in tax-deferred accounts. So pulling this all together, let's look at one more example with that person we talked about earlier making $70,000 annually with their salary with a 4% company match, who was willing to invest 10% of his gross salary. What difference does it make in terms of taxes in the long run by them contributing their first 4% to their 401k to get the full match and the other 6% to a Roth IRA versus putting the full 10% only in the 401k? Assuming this person in both accounts was investing into an S&P 500 ETF that was tracking the broad market and was earning an average return of about 9% over the last 30 years. Between their own contributions and the employer contributions, they would be investing a total of $9,800 a year, which, assuming that rate of return, would grow to over $1.3 million in that 30-year time frame. This amount, in terms of total dollars, would be the same in both scenarios if you were only investing in the 401k or if you were investing up to the company match in the 401k and taking the rest of it and investing in the Roth. The difference comes in the taxes that you pay on that gross. In the 401k only scenario, you owe deferred taxes on the entire amount and will have to pay taxes upon withdrawals in whatever tax bracket you fall into at the time, depending on how much income you want in your retirement on a yearly basis. We contrast this with the 401k plus using the Roth scenario. You would now have almost $600,000 of tax-free money that grew from putting the other 6% into the Roth, and you would only owe taxes on the other about $700,000. Even accounting for not getting as big of a deduction to your taxable income on a yearly basis because of contributing only 4% to your 401k to get the match versus the full 10 because you're now putting money in the Roth, you still have a long-term tax savings of over $500,000 just by using the combination of the 401k and Roth more smartly together versus only investing in the tax-deferred 401k. So this $500,000 amount in that scenario, obviously there's a lot of other individual life circumstances that can't be simplified into that. It doesn't take into account life changes like getting married, having kids, and of course income fluctuations, both positive and negatively over time, but hopefully for all of you watching in the positive direction. But it should point out that it makes a lot of sense for people to make sure that you are maximizing your tax-free gross while taking advantage of the company match at the same time. It's not either or. It's not only invest in the 401k or only invest in the Roth. Using both of them in a combination where you contribute up to the company match in your 401k and then you start investing into tax-exempt accounts will probably end up putting you in a better financial and tax situation over the long term. If you want to see how these concepts may affect you personally, but you don't know where to start, or maybe you have a lot of tax-deferred money and you want to see how it impacts your retirement, and if it's possible to convert some of this to tax-free money, take the next steps with your financial future today. Schedule a meeting with one of our financial professionals at grandsummitwealth.com. The link to our website and the book a meeting is in the description. We hope this was informative. Make sure to like and subscribe as we uncover more 1% wealth secrets that the upper class doesn't want you to know about, and we'll see you in the next one.